Alright, this is part 3 of my Ron Deranged Detective series. I would highly recommend you watch the first 2 videos in order to get context on this one. With that out of the way, let's continue on with the next segment. One of the things I observed while reading this manga was that it doesn't waste any time. Makes sense with part 1 having 96 chapters and each chapter being around 30 to 35 pages. That's around 3,100 pages to tell a self-contained story. But I think Amano-san did this really well, as each chapter either adds consistency, a character moment, character building, or more information about the incident that happened to Ron. Chapter 1 was about introducing the duo and Ron's condition. Chapter 2 was learning some information about Blue and the potential consequences of Ron returning to detective work, as well as showing how each case might go and where Amamiya develops a crush on Ron. Chapters 3 and 4 follows up on that potential consequence plot point by having an investigation done on Ron, Fitch volunteering, and information involving Ron's next car. Chapters 5 and 6 and 7 and 8 introduce Kasemi and Mafu respectively, and you starting to get the picture? Any plot-related clue or info are given in small amounts rather than over explanation that feels like exposition. The story has a balance of plot-related cases and non-plot-related cases to give the reader some breathing room. Personally, some of my favorite chapters came from non-plot related cases with focusing on the characters interacting. For example, the missing cabbages case has every supporting character come to Ron's apartment to celebrate Toto's birthday with a hot pot party. The problem is that there's no cabbages being sold anywhere in town, and without cabbage in a hot pot is the equivalent of removing a sturdy piece from a Jenga tower. This leads everybody to come up with possible explanation as to who might have done it and how. It reminds me of some of my friend groups in Discord and discussion and theory crafting that happen in them. Like one person will suggest something, but someone else might suggest that might not be it and come up with a different theory and the explanation behind it. At least this group is a lot less chaotic than the ones that I usually go to. Some of my favorite deductions are that the culprit is a farmer who dumps pesticides in a fit of anger and regretted it, so they went to collect as many as they can. And another is a jewel thief who, when fleeing the scene, shoved the stolen diamonds in a loaded truck full of cabbages. But the truck took off, and by the time they tracked it down, the cabbages had been unloaded, so they went around buying all the cabbages nearby. Funny enough, the culprit turns out to be Spitz, who went to the stores in the area and bought every cabbage just because he hates them. It's a story full of character interaction and funny moments. And it has one of the best payoffs where all of Ron's aliases come back to bite him, only for him to come up with an excuse that there are days he doesn't feel like using his real name, instead uses nicknames. And everyone bought it. Another example is the Genius Composer kidnapping, which involves a kidnapper named Hummingbird and the several kidnapping cases where he sends a greeting card similar to a fan letter and they kidnaps well-known geniuses from all sorts of fields. The strangest thing is that he always released his victims after a certain period of time, and the reason why is actually pretty sweet. Hear me out for a bit. After an attempt kidnapping of a singer, the duo managed to corner Hummingbird, and it turns out that he's doing this for his daughter. His daughter is a musical genius who was raised to be the next top pianist, but the pressure and demand from special instructors on top of being lonely broke her. She became an empty shell and closed off. However, every so often when he turns on the TV for her, the people and music on screen brings out tears to her eyes. Those people being the supreme artistic geniuses. So he did what any loving father would do and kidnaps those talents in hope it would aid in his daughter's recovery. And it actually works, as once the victim learns about the situation, they meet the daughter one-on-one without the father being there. He doesn't know what they talk about, but hearing his daughter's laughter makes all the moments he lives for. And the victims benefit from this too, as Ron theorized that the reason daughter cried was because she felt sympathy and sensed the same loneliness in them. And when she meets them, they feel healed and manage to recover from the slump they'd gone through. As an artist myself, I relate to the struggle of being in a creative slump, and finding out the lengths the Hummingbird willing to go for his daughter was really sweet, finishing the chapter with a warm feeling inside. However, a crime is still a crime, but he managed to slip away before Todo was about to arrest him. Well, here's to seeing more of him later on in the future. Sorry about that tirade, I just wanted to share a few of my favorite chapters. Let's get back to the plot. The plot starts to develop further in Chapter 9, where Todo was sent a mysterious invitation to a meteor shower viewing at an isolated island observatory, and Ron tags along because he sees this as an opportunity to break away from cases due to Todo being almost killed by a poison-laced marker in the previous chapter. When they get there, the director mentions the reason why he invited Todo was because he's Japan's foremost detective, and there was a concern involving a case that happened 10 years ago, so Todo and Ron are here just in case. They arrive at the observatory and meet the rest of the guests, including Blue's close circle instructor, Ron Grizzly, who is acting as a bodyguard. Later on that night, Todo learns from Grizzly about the tragedy that occurred to Ron. He was doing a practical exercise where students work with the police to catch criminals, and Ron, using his intellect, discovered the hideouts of 7 murderers. But when the police entered the hideout, Ron was standing in the middle, covered in blood and holding a knife. It was known as the Bloody Field Trip case, and after some investigation, it was to believe that Ron had no memories of the incident in the 30-minute period that had happened, and it was considered a case of temporary insanity, resulting in Ron avoiding the death penalty and having his license revoked. And it looks like history is being repeated again when, you guessed it, a murder takes place similar to the one that happened 10 years ago, with Ron as the main suspect, as there are no other ways in or out besides the one door, which was locked, and coincidentally, Ron has the only key in his pocket. That's right, everybody, we have ourselves a
locked room mystery! It's an impossible crime!
Things aren't looking good for Ron, to the point where he starts to doubt and almost convince himself that he is crazy. But Todo, being the good friend that he is, raised an interesting point about how the victim was innocent, while all the people Ron tried to pressure kill themselves were criminals. This snaps Ron out of it, and his brain activates critical thinking times 20 and brings up some valid points. 1. He's a terrible shot with a gun, and 2. The victim was shot from behind, and even if he took 1,000 tries, he still wouldn't be able to kill her. Plus, at the time of the body discovery, not only was there glass surrounding Ron, who was barefoot, but the telescope was large enough to block both the victim and Ron's from each other's view, meaning that there's no way for Ron to take the shot without cutting his feet open, even if he has good aim. And there's this nice moment where Ron wonders why he isn't anxious as he was 5 years ago, only to realize that it's because he has Todo, the only friend he ever had. One that believes in him and is willing to defend him even when the odds are stacked against him. And it's that loyalty that helps convince Grizzly that Ron is not the culprit and lets him go to join the investigation. And the way the true culprit pulled it off, involving a rigging system as well as drugging both the victim and Ron in the locked room in order to frame him. Unfortunately, Grizzly managed to figure it out and try to confront him, only to get murdered in the process. After discovering the true culprit, Ron enters kill on sight mode with Todo stopping it, but their efforts are in vain as the culprit takes the cyanide pill. Ron questions why him of all people, and if this was planned from the beginning, to which he answered yes, and that Ron will never escape his grasp. Then he dies, and in the next morning, Ron finds a chilling discovery as the spot where the victim was killed has a mark that is the same as the scar on Ron's neck. The same one that appeared after the incident 5 years ago, meaning the people behind this case are the ones responsible for Ron's stolen 5 years of detective work, and the ones that are behind all of this are the M family.